Good morning. This is Lorraine.
And Jennifer Denny.
And a year ago, you were happy with the amount of sales volume you had. And quite honestly, you haven't done anything really differently, but you've noticed that demand for your product has fallen off. Oh my goodness, right? And your first instinct is to throw a lot of money at demand generation marketing. But Jen, is that the right thing to do?
No, or maybe your first thing is well, there's something wrong with the marketing. Like, we better go down there and we better go tighten the ropes and see what's going on there. And I say that like in a bad way, but it's actually not necessarily a bad thing to do in that situation, but it might not be the problem.
It might not be the problem. And in many cases, the change in demand for your product might not be in your marketing at all. And I'm not saying don't look at your marketing,
Oh, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
but while you're investigating what's going on with your marketing, you need to look at the world at large.
Yeah, so it's the whole consumer confidence and how does that affect your particular product or service. And there's consumer index reports that are put out, and people, businesses alike, and consumers alike make buying decisions on whether or not they feel like it's a good time for them to buy a certain product or service or where to spend their money. They might not be great at looking at their own finances and what can I afford, but they're making their decisions based on the news that they watch, the people they hang around with, and that's going to affect your business.
It absolutely is. And you almost have to get into the head of your customer. You have to look at what's going on in the rest of their world. And honestly, this impacts B2B sales and it impacts business to consumer sales. What pressures are they experiencing if you're selling a consumer product? If the cost of groceries rises, do they have disposable income for your product?
Inflation affects everything, and that there is less money to go around, and sometimes less people to do the same job with introductions of tech like AI, where you think you need less people to do the same job, and so you cut resources, and that's going to affect people's purchasing power. And this is not new. Lorraine's been around the block longer than me. This happens. It's very cyclical. It happens a lot. And you have to be prepared for the downs and the ups with consistency.
And that is one of the hardest things. And I started my business originally in 2002, and we were in a bit of a slowdown. I lived through the 2008, 2009, 2010. And I can see you nodding because that's really when you came into this. And that was a huge downswing. And we've had minor ripples since. And the things that I've learned, one of the things sounds a little counterintuitive. When the economy is cycling down, when the economy is slowing down, sometimes you need to actually ramp up your marketing.
Stay confident, take the market share because others are not as confident and weren't planned for a downfall. And that is your time to strike. Your time to strike is not when everybody else is up there. I'm not saying don't strike then too, but it is absolutely your time to strike when everybody else is pulling back. Because we talked about it in a previous show, when you stop talking about your brand, then you stop being talked about.
Absolutely. And so understanding what are some of the pressures and really thinking about how does your product fit? Is your product a necessity and people are going to keep buying it, but maybe at a slower pace? Is your product a luxury? When I was way back in my career, one of the things that I learned is even in recessions, some products you sell more of. I'll give you an example. In an economic downturn, sales of women's dresses used to go down and sales of lipstick went up. Because that was the little treat. That was the thing that made you feel better. You
Uh-huh.
couldn't afford a new dress, so you made a lower substitute. And there are examples of that in all sorts of industries.
Yeah.
Now, I'll tell you, during COVID, we also had a little bit of an economic downturn, but lipstick sales didn't go up.
And so it was unpredictable, right? Like
Yep.
today's market in general, it's not predictable like it might have been prior to COVID. But I'll tell you what is predictable is consistent marketing in multiple channels and actually building a brand that when people do need your product or service, they do know who you are, that you're creating this memorable brand that is attached to some sort of identity that associates with, yeah, when I need that, I'm calling that person because I know they can solve it.
Absolutely. And I'm going to go back to the COVID thing for just a minute.
Yeah.
Lipstick didn't sell, but eyeshadow did. And
Interesting.
so part of that is, what is it in your product line that is most popular normally? What is it
There
in
you
your
go.
product line that makes sense
Your
right
money maker,
now?
your ROI. Like, what can you like rely on? Maybe it's, oh, I'm not sure. Yeah, I can hear you though.
So, you know what? I think we're going to leave you with this thought, because I love the internet and I love technology, and some days it loves us and today it doesn't. But the bottom line is, even in challenging times, remember your customers, remember what's important to them, and if this